It's not as it usually is,
It's exactly how it is in my mind.
A monument of American television collapsed in the blink of an eye. Jimmy Kimmel Live, a show that reigned for more than 20 years, was suddenly wiped out. The real shock was not in the fact that the program ended, but in what Jamie Foxx had just exposed. Fox spoke of a dark power structure where white entertainers could make terrible mistakes and still be protected, while artists of color with even the smallest blemish were buried without mercy. And Jamie Foxx knew this better than anyone. He had stood on Kimmel's stage, sat backstage, and witnessed firsthand how the rules of this game worked. The questions thundered, striking Hollywood like a hammer blow. Why was Jimmy Kimmel's scandal hidden for decades? Why is it that the same mistake earns forgiveness for some, but destruction for others? Jimmy Kimmel, from the golden boy of late night to a shocking downfall. A humble beginning. Jimmy Kimmel was born in 1967 in Brooklyn, New York, into a working-class family. From an early age, he was fascinated by the sounds of radio, often listening to DJs crack jokes and bring laughter to listeners. After graduating from high school, Kimmel attended the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, but his passion for broadcasting soon pulled him in another direction. In 1989, Kimmel began working as a DJ at a local radio station in Seattle before moving on to Phoenix and Tucson. These years sharpened his ability to chat, joke, and read an audience. He once said that radio taught him the art of filling silence with laughter, something that later became his personal trademark. His first big break came with Win Ben Stein's Money. He wasn't the star of the show, but he knew how to steal the spotlight. Witty, sarcastic, sometimes biting Kimmel made America take notice. His first Emmy followed elevating an unknown DJ into a rising face of television. Then came The Man Show, a controversial program full of outrageous stunts and cheap laughs, but endlessly talked about. Kimmel proved he knew how to keep audiences buzzing, whether with laughter or outrage. From there, the door to the tough but glittering world of late-night talk shows swung wide open. Jimmy Kimmel Live, an unexpected phenomenon. In 2003, ABC took a big gamble by giving Kimmel his own talk show. At first, critics scoffed. How could a DJ ever compete with Jay Leno or David Letterman? But they were wrong. Jimmy Kimmel Live became a phenomenon. Without the polish, without the glitter, Kimmel brought an everyday quality into late night, telling family stories, poking fun at himself, and turning small details into laughter. He broke away from the old formula, making the talk show feel less like a distant spectacle and more like a living room conversation. Young audiences loved it. Hollywood stars lined up to appear. From Tom Cruise to Beyoncé, from Robert Downey Jr. to Rihanna, everyone wanted a seat on that hot couch. Kimmel naturally became Hollywood's best friend. Power at its peak. For 2 decades, Jimmy Kimmel Live became part of American culture. Kimmel hosted the Emmys, then the Oscars, entrusted again and again with responsibilities few could ever hold. He became a heavyweight rival to Fallon, Colbert, and Conan. At his peak, Kimmel could make audiences burst out laughing with mean tweets, then bring the entire nation to tears as he spoke about his infant son's heart surgery. He was not just a host, he was a symbol of Hollywood's soft power. Because of this, Kimmel was trusted with the most important events from the Emmys to the Oscars. His repeated selection as Oscar host was clear proof of his stature, not merely as an MC, but as the face of Hollywood in its most defining moments. If the story ended here, Kimmel might have forever remained the golden boy of late night. But behind the spotlight were stains that had been carefully hidden. Scandals, ignored, the blackface, Karl Malone parody, a mistake that cannot be erased. In the late 1990s, when Jimmy Kimmel was still a familiar face on The Man Show on Comedy Central, he performed a series of skits parodying NBA legend Karl Malone. Kimmel put on blackface, wore a Utah Jazz uniform, and mimicked Malone's Southern accent in a drawn-out, awkward, almost silly manner. Audiences at the time might have laughed, calling it harmless parody. But in American history, blackface has never been harmless. It is a stain that stretches back centuries. In the 19th century, white performers painted their faces black to mock African Americans in minstrel shows. For the black community, every appearance of blackface is a reopening of an old wound. The problem was not just imitating Karl Malone. The way Kimmel portrayed Malone as slow-witted and clumsy made many feel he was recycling an age-old stereotype that black people are less intelligent. What might have been brushed off as comedy in 1999 became a ticking time bomb as society grew more aware. In 2020, when the Black Lives Matter movement surged after the death of George Floyd. Kimmel's blackface clips resurfaced and spread rapidly online. The hashtag #CancelKimmel trended on Twitter. A wave of backlash followed. If a black entertainer had done this in whiteface, their career would have been erased instantly. Under pressure, Kimmel issued a statement: "I never intended to offend anyone. I thought I was simply impersonating a celebrity, not mocking a race." But the apology did little to calm the outrage. Instead, it highlighted a painful double standard. Kimmel kept his hosting job, kept appearing on television every night, kept leading the Oscars, while many black entertainers had lost everything over far smaller mistakes. But blackface was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind it, Jimmy Kimmel's career carried many more jokes that seemed harmless at first, but cut deeply into minority communities. Racist jokes, when laughter becomes a blade. African Americans, when comedy turns distorted. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, beyond the blackface impersonation of Karl Malone, Kimmel repeatedly did black voices both on The Man Show and in the early years of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The voices were exaggerated, drawn-out tones, slurred speech, awkward word choices. White audiences roared with laughter. But for the black community, the message was clear: you are the punchline. It wasn't aimed at an individual. It turned an entire community into the target of ridicule. At a time when America was struggling to confront its racial divisions, these skits felt like a knife twisting deeper into an unhealed wound. When the clips resurfaced in 2020, Kimmel said, "I have long been reluctant to address this. I apologize to those who were genuinely hurt or offended. I never considered that this might be seen as anything other than an impression of a fellow human being." But what happened afterward? He did not lose his job. His show was not canceled. Just a few months later, Kimmel was back on air, still the familiar ABC host, and trusted enough to host the Oscars 4 times: 2017, 2018, 2023, 2024. Black audiences were not the only ones targeted. Kimmel also set his sights on another community: Latinos. From 1999 to 2003, during the run of The Man Show, many episodes repeated a familiar motif. Mexican characters appeared on screen as janitors, waiters, or laborers. These moments often had no dialogue, just fleeting images inserted as comic relief. Audiences may have found it funny, but for the Latino community, it was disrespectful. It reinforced stereotypes that Mexicans and other Latin Americans were only suited for menial, low-wage labor. Not once did the show portray a successful or intellectual Latino character. And when a joke is repeated dozens of times on national television, it stops being comedy and becomes a cultural message. If the Latino portrayals were a quiet insult, then for the Asian American community, the scandal erupted like a wildfire. Asian Americans. The Kids' Table scandal of 2013. On October 16, 2013, an episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live aired a sketch called Kids' Table. The premise seemed simple: let children discuss grown-up issues such as America's national debt. When the host asked, "What should we do to pay back the huge debt to China?" a 6-year-old boy blurted out, "K, everyone in China." The entire studio erupted in laughter. Instead of correcting the child, Kimmel played along, turning the moment into a punchline, the big laugh of the skit. The reaction was immediate. Asian American communities were outraged. Organizations such as the 80-20 Initiative, the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, and numerous Chinese American associations launched a coordinated call for a boycott. Within days, hundreds of protesters gathered outside ABC's headquarters in Burbank, California, holding signs that read, "Racism is not a joke," and "Fire Kimmel." A White House petition demanding Kimmel's removal collected over 100,000 signatures. ABC was forced to apologize. "We sincerely apologize. The segment was meant to provide humor and did not reflect our views." But in the end, the show went on. For Asian Americans, especially the Chinese community, long burdened by the yellow peril stereotype in American history, the child's words were not innocent. They reopened painful memories of being seen as a threat. Under mounting pressure, ABC issued an official apology and removed the Kids' Table segment from all re-airings. But the controversy lay in what didn't happen. The show was not canceled. Kimmel did not lose his job. And the scandal faded as if it had never existed. Major news outlets covered the story, but with a softer tone, an inappropriate joke from another time, a relic of late 1990s humor. Some of Kimmel's colleagues even defended him publicly. He didn't mean any harm, he was just playing a role. The result was that the incident never turned into a true cancellation. Kimmel kept hosting the Oscars and remained firmly in power. It was this downplaying that fueled even greater anger. The internet exploded, but mainstream media tamped it down, creating two opposite realities. On social media, it looked like a career-ending scandal. In Hollywood, it was treated as nothing more than a minor misstep. And this was the moment when the comparison became unbearable. The same mistake, two different fates. Let's pose a question. If a black entertainer had made the same kind of parody, or let a child say something shocking on live television, would they ever be allowed back on a national stage? The answer is obvious. No, and Hollywood has proven this time and again. Kevin Hart, an Oscar dream, shattered by old tweets. On December 4, 2018, Kevin Hart joyfully shared on Instagram, "For years I've been asked if I would ever host the Oscars, and my answer was always the same. It would be the opportunity of a lifetime for me. I am so happy to say the day has finally come." But just 2 days later, old tweets from 2009-2011 resurfaced, in which Hart once joked that if he saw his son playing with a doll, he would break it over his head. The internet called the jokes homophobic, and a wave of backlash followed. Hart apologized. "I sincerely apologize to the LGBTQ community for my insensitive words from the past. I've grown and I'm in a different place in my life." But Hollywood did not forgive. He was forced to step down, writing bitterly, "I have made the choice to step down from hosting this year's Oscar. I would never want to be a distraction." A few old tweets and his Oscar dream disappeared. Nick Cannon. A television empire toppled overnight. In July 2020, on his podcast Cannon's Class, Nick Cannon made remarks that were labeled offensive toward the Jewish community. The reaction was immediate. Viacom-CBS announced the termination of their partnership. Viacom-CBS condemns bigotry of any kind. "We are terminating our relationship with Nick Cannon." Overnight, Wild 'N Out, the show tied to Cannon's name for nearly 15 years, was taken off the air. Cannon had to apologize publicly. "First and foremost, I extend my deepest and most sincere apologies to my Jewish brothers and sisters. I feel ashamed of the uninformed words that came out of my mouth. But the damage was done." He vanished from television for a long time, his career heavily disrupted. Whoopi Goldberg. Immediate suspension. Even as a legend. On January 31, 2022, during The View, Whoopi Goldberg said of the Holocaust, "It's about man's inhumanity to man. It's not about race." The comment sparked instant outrage, criticized as dismissing the racial aspect of the Holocaust. Just 1 day later, ABC announced her suspension for 2 weeks. ABC News president wrote, "Effective immediately, I am suspending Whoopi Goldberg for 2 weeks for her wrong and hurtful comments." Goldberg apologized. "I said the Holocaust is not about race, and it is indeed about race. I stand corrected." But the shock showed that even a legend was not immune to swift punishment. Now place Jimmy Kimmel beside them, the Karl Malone blackface parody. If a black performer had done a whiteface parody, their career would have been buried on the spot. The 2013 Kids Table sketch. If a black host had let a child say those words and then played along, they would have been fired the very next day. No exceptions. The long chain of offensive jokes, if they had come from a performer of color, it would have been a one-way ticket out of Hollywood with no chance of return. But for Kimmel, he lost nothing. He continued to be trusted by ABC, chosen multiple times to host the Oscars, the biggest entertainment event in the world. He was still celebrated as Hollywood's best friend. This is the double standard that Jamie Foxx and many other artists of color are furious about. The same mistakes, yet completely different outcomes. For powerful white figures, scandals are brushed off as old controversies. But for entertainers of color, they become career-ending. And it is this contrast that gives Jamie Foxx's words such weight. They are no longer just the sigh of an individual, but a hammer strike against the entire system. He is not simply recalling the past of a late-night host, but exposing a truth that has lasted for decades. Hollywood has never been fair. Jamie Foxx, the insider, speaks out from regular guest to reluctant witness. Throughout more than 2 decades of Jimmy Kimmel Live, one of the stars who appeared most often was Jamie Foxx. Each time he showed up, audiences witnessed the lively chemistry between two powerful figures, Kimmel as the witty host, Fox with his charm and clever storytelling. He promoted films, launched albums, cracked jokes, and even delivered improvised moments that lit up the studio. Because he had sat in the hot seat not just once, but many times, Fox became part of the family. Viewers believed that if anyone understood what happened behind the scenes of the show, it was him. And when Fox decided to speak out after Jimmy Kimmel Live was suddenly canceled, the public believed his words instantly. He wasn't an outsider looking in, he was someone who had walked through those backstage doors over and over again. Fox saw Kimmel treat guests of color differently from white guests. In his account, Fox did not mince words. He directly pointed out what many artists of color in Hollywood had whispered about for years, but rarely dared to say publicly the difference in treatment. With white A-list guests from Hollywood movie stars to global pop singers, Kimmel would often step into the green room chat, warmly share laughs, and create an atmosphere of camaraderie. When they later sat down on stage, the conversations flowed easily, friendly, and familiar, as if they had known each other for years. But when the guests were artists of color, a young rapper, an actor of African descent, or a Latino entertainer, the backstage mood shifted. Fox recalled moments when Kimmel would simply pass by, nod politely, then turn away to talk with the crew. No warmth, no friendly banter. Fox saw Kimmel treat guests of color differently from white guests. That statement spread like wildfire, not because it came from an outsider, but from someone who had been backstage many times, a witness who had seen it all with his own eyes. The pressure boiling over Fox was not unaware of Hollywood's unwritten rules. In an industry where image is carefully protected, he knew that speaking the truth meant angering the entire system. For years, he chose silence. Those differences he witnessed, he kept to himself, sharing only in the company of close friends. But when Jimmy Kimmel Live, a show once considered a pillar of American television, was canceled, Fox saw it as a crack in the wall of silence. And this was the moment to speak. "I've been silent long enough. When one door closes, you have the right to open another, the door to the truth." He did not speak with rage, but with a cold calm, and that calmness sent chills through the audience. Because it was not an outburst of anger, but frustration that had built up over decades finally breaking loose. Why do Fox's words carry such weight? First, he was someone who had appeared on the show many times, and viewers saw firsthand how he was received. Second, Fox is a multi-talented artist, an Oscar and Grammy winner, with a solid standing, someone who has no need to create scandal for attention. And third, he has navigated Hollywood's tough waters before. He knows the rules of the game and the price of breaking them. This combination gave his words a power no article could match. They carried the force of testimony. On social media, after Fox spoke, viewers began revisiting old clips. They compared episodes featuring him with those featuring famous white stars. A wave of comments erupted. Looking back now, the atmosphere really was different. What had once been only a vague feeling suddenly became indirect evidence. And it all began with Fox's words. He turned invisible differences once confined to backstage into a public issue, forcing audiences to face it. Once Fox spoke, the public no longer debated whether the show was canceled because of low ratings or scheduling. They began asking, was this the price of secrets that had been hidden for too long? Fox didn't need to present written proof. His personal experience as someone who had been in those green rooms many times was enough to spark suspicion. And in Hollywood, where image is everything, even suspicion can ignite a storm. Fox didn't stop at what he had seen from the hot seat. He went further, turning the spotlight on the crew itself. Behind the late-night show, the shadows, behind the laughter. When the lights went out, the fun was gone. Audiences usually see only the bright lights, the roaring laughter, and the seamless chemistry between host and guest. But Jamie Foxx, who had walked through the backstage doors of Jimmy Kimmel Live many times, insisted that behind the stage, things were not as dazzling as they seemed. He recalled moments when, right after a segment that had the crowd in stitches, the green room atmosphere turned tense. Producers whispered among themselves, staff rushed to review the footage, and cuts were made to remove anything that might cause trouble. That feeling made Fox realize the laughter on screen was just a surface. In reality, it was an environment tightly controlled. The audience sees comedy and fun. But backstage, you understand that every word, every move is calculated to stay within the frame they've built, Fox revealed. The crew. Controlling the narrative. One thing that struck Fox most was how Kimmel's team controlled the narrative. Not every guest had the freedom to say what they wanted. Some had to go through a briefing before going on air, reminded to avoid hot political topics, not to dig into personal controversies, and to never bring up certain sensitive Hollywood figures. If the guest was a white A-lister, the control often felt light, more like a suggestion. But for artists of color, the difference was clear. Fox recalled cases where production staff handed over a long list of don'ts, from clothing choices to storytelling style to the kind of language they could use. That left many of Fox's peers feeling stifled. They could not fully express their personalities. Instead, they had to follow an invisible script carefully designed by the crew. The Dark Secrets of Kimmel Fox suggested that Kimmel was not just a funny host, he was also someone who held many of Hollywood's dark secrets. After thousands of episodes, Kimmel had come into close contact with nearly every A-list star, hearing stories the public would never get to know. According to Fox, this advantage was exactly what kept Kimmel in power for over 2 decades. He knows how to keep secrets, and sometimes knowing too much becomes a shield of protection. People hesitate. They won't dare to cross him, Fox shared. That statement sent chills through many. Could it be that Kimmel's true power lay not only in ratings, but also in a vault of untold stories? Casting, when skin tone shapes, opportunity. One detail Fox did not hesitate to point out was how Jimmy Kimmel Live selected and managed its guests. He stressed that artists of color were often subjected to stricter image control. The result: many left the show feeling they were not allowed to be themselves. They were turned into safe versions of themselves, just enough to get laughs, but never given the chance to fully shine. Fox once said, "Behind the laughter is an invisible barrier. You step onto the stage, but sometimes it feels like you're only allowed to move within a narrow frame they've drawn for you." Power as a shield. All of this explained why Jimmy Kimmel Live managed to survive more than 20 years, despite repeated controversies. Because Kimmel was not just a host, he was someone who knew how to use power to control the narrative, protect his image, and maintain an untouchable position. Fox emphasized, "If you're an artist of color, you know that a single misstep could end your career. But with Kimmel, every stumble found a way to be covered up. That's the injustice that made me speak out." With his sharp words, Fox pulled the audience away from the glittering illusion of late-night television. He showed them the backstage world where laughter was no longer innocent, but carefully managed, trimmed, and calculated. He revealed how power itself became a shield covering scandals and sustaining unfairness. And above all, he exposed a bitter truth for artists of color: the chance to truly be themselves on that stage has never been equal. The final day of Jimmy Kimmel Live has come a shocking decision on a September night. On September 17, 2025, ABC dropped an announcement that shook Hollywood to its core. Jimmy Kimmel Live, a talk show that had lasted more than 20 years, was being suspended indefinitely. No more familiar applause at 11:35 p.m. No more witty exchanges that had once become America's nightly ritual. The announcement was only a few lines long, citing broadcast strategy restructuring and shifts in audience taste. But in Hollywood, everyone knew that was just the cover. Rumors spread like wildfire, claiming the decision was really the result of months of scandal pressure, buried accusations, and public outrage that could no longer be contained. A divided Hollywood. The moment the news broke, Hollywood split into 2 camps. On one side, there was sorrow. Colleagues and longtime friends of Kimmel praised him as the man who shaped American late night, and the hashtag #Thank You Jimmy trended on Twitter X. But on the other side came voices of relief. In press junkets and quiet conversations, some artists admitted openly it was about time. For them, Jimmy Kimmel Live was more than just a talk show. It was a symbol of a system where power could bury controversies, while artists of color could see their careers collapse over the smallest misstep. The irony was that the downfall of Jimmy Kimmel Live didn't close the story. It opened many others. When the giant of late night fell, voices once buried began to rise. Jamie Foxx was the first to break the silence, but soon others followed, speaking out about the same experiences. The unspoken rules, the tight control, and the invisible line between privilege and punishment. From loss to opportunity, Hollywood has always prided itself on being progressive and open. Yet the events of September 17, 2025 rang like an alarm bell. They showed that even a legendary program could vanish overnight. And they showed that when the stage lights go dark, the truth hidden for too long will eventually find its way into the light. Jimmy Kimmel Live was once seen as a cornerstone of American television. But the day it went off air became proof of a harsh reality: the system knows how to shield power while others live under constant fear of being punished. Kimmel stood as the prime example. Scandal after scandal, yet he kept his seat, kept hosting the Oscars, kept being called Hollywood's best friend. Meanwhile, many colleagues saw their careers end over mistakes far smaller. In that picture, Jamie Foxx emerged as one of the rare voices willing to shatter the silence. He did not just call out one man, he challenged an entire standard. His courage sparked a new conversation: Hollywood must change or risk destroying its own image. And when the dust settled, what remained was not the laughter from a canceled talk show, but a harder truth. There are truths that cannot stay buried forever. When the stage lights go out, what remains is justice.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.